So, hope you guys are having a good night so far. So today's subject is about working on music every day and the benefits of working on music every day. For me, I'm just going to dive right into it. For me, this one habit was one of the most important habits I developed that helped me shift from finishing 3 or 4 songs a year to finishing 52 songs in 13 months. That came from consistent daily practice. Now, of course, over the 13 months, I did miss days. I probably missed about between 20 and 25 days total over 13 months. But developing that habit was the pinnacle for me resetting my brain for creativity. So if you want to bring your music production to the next level, you should really try to develop a habit of finding the time every day to work on music. If possible, the same time each day. But if it's not possible, just doing it every day is going to be really powerful for you. It's going to change so much about the way you produce music. Let me give you just a few examples that I've written down. So one benefit is that when you're not working on music every day, when you learn a new skill, when you learn a new music production technique or skill or what have you, it doesn't stay in your brain. It falls out before you jump back into your next session if you're not doing things every day, or at least close to every day. So you end up having to recap everything that you just learned instead of it just being there for you when you need it. So that's a huge thing. It takes so much extra time to just recap on things that you learned or things that you forget. And you end up having to go back, like if you learn something from a video or whatever, you end up having to go back to the video and watching it all over again. So it just takes you at least 2 or 3 times the amount of time to ingrain something into your head. Another thing is that by working on music every day, it tells your brain that this is something that's really important. And your brain starts to take it more seriously. Your brain, basically, here's the thing, is that anytime you're doing something new, and if you're not regularly making music every day, if possible, your brain doesn't look at it as an important habit. So it becomes secondary. It becomes reserve. So because of that, your brain is going to fight you every time you want to sit down and make music. That's another reason, like, for example, me live streaming, I'm trying to do it close to every day now because it gets better, it gets easier. When I go too long without doing it, it's almost like I forget how to do it, or how I feel much less natural getting in front of the camera. I mean, getting in front of a camera for me is not something that's totally normal. It always feels a little bit strange. So when I go too long without doing it, it feels like I've got to relearn things all over again and get to a comfort zone all over again. So another thing is, when you're working on music every day, it's going to not only lead to you finishing more songs, but it's also going to lead you to finishing more songs while you're still inspired with the initial idea that drove the song in the first place. So normally what happens is, if you just every once in a while work on music, you're going to have an inspiration for a song, you're going to come back to it, and oftentimes you're going to feel the need to take it in a completely new direction because your head's in a different space, or you're just not going to connect with the original idea, and it's going to make for a more disjointed experience. So that's something that you should really pay attention to as well, because it's going to just make music production more difficult for you. And your goal should be to get this into your brain so that your brain works with you instead of against you. See, your brain, like a computer, it has a certain amount of CPU, and if you're not working on music every day, then your brain's not necessarily going to give you the resources necessary to be creative, because it's going to want to use those resources for other things that are habitual. Because once something becomes a habit, then it becomes like second nature. So if you work on something every day, let's say you have trouble with song arrangement, right? Well, if this is something that you work on over and over and over, pretty soon song arrangement gets really, really fast for you, because the brain takes it from this thing that you only do on occasion to something that you're doing every few days you're arranging songs, and that habit gets ingrained in you. So it becomes part of your reserve tank instead of you having to use more resources to do the same thing. So the more you do something, the less resources it takes from your brain, and you're less likely to get really tired from it. Another good thing is this habit will push you forward when you sit down and you're uninspired. And more often than not, you're not going to be super inspired to make music. The inspiration usually comes after you sit down and just get started, and then the inspiration slowly kind of comes back to you. But if this sitting down to make music doesn't feel natural and normal to you, then you're always going to continue to fight with your brain. And this is a big thing. It's not about all the technical skills and all that stuff. It's more about your brain resources, and it's more about the mental habits that you have that can bring you much more success. It wasn't that I had tons more skills that brought me from finishing 4 songs to finishing 52 songs. It was that I changed my relationship with my own brain when it came to creativity and music making. Obviously, repeating consistently is going to also improve your skills much faster. So if you want to develop more quickly, every day compounds into the next day, into the next day. So let's say that every day you work on music, you're getting 1% better, right? Well, that accumulates over time. So it's not like in 100 days, you're going to be 100% better. You're going to be much further than that, because, you are going to add 1%. So let's say you're at 10%, you add 1% of 10%, and that's 1. Well, then the next day you're adding 1% of 11%, and then the next day you're adding 1% of 12 point something percent. So it gives you more and more reach, and it compounds on itself as far as how good you get over time. What else do I have? Well, yeah, like I said, you're going to continue to struggle to sit down to make music if you just don't ingrain this in your head as this is something that you do. In fact, it's probably better and more beneficial to you to work on music 15 to 20 minutes every day instead of doing like an all-day session every once in a while. Because once again, when you work on music every day, your brain is picking up from where you left off, so you're able to continue instead of having to recap. And yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say is, if you feel like you don't have the time, you're not going to really have the time to do full day sessions very often, are you? So everyone can start with 15 minutes. And the great thing about starting to work on music daily, even if it's 15 minutes, is that as you work every day for a small amount of time, what happens is that time gap seems to naturally expand, and you'll find yourself having a half hour to 45 minutes a day without you really having to try to push yourself forward or make the time. It's almost like the time just kind of appears. So that's my challenge for you. If you're busy, oftentimes one of the best approaches is to work on music first thing in the morning. So maybe even get some sleep an hour earlier so that you can get up an hour earlier, and that way your brain is rested and you're starting fresh. You know what I mean? And when you start fresh, you don't have all the day's worries and troubles getting in the way of your creativity. So oftentimes starting your day with your music and then going about your day is going to be more beneficial, and you might get more done. So with that, I'll let you think about that, and hopefully you get something